Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Breaking of the Talos Principle. This is kind of a side spin-off series to my series I Will Break Your Game with the Talos Principle, in which I go through the game and break hopefully every single puzzle in the game. I finally reached a point in that series where I was arriving at levels I'd never previously broken before, so the breaks that I was going to have to come up with would be entirely new to me in order to do them for the series. So I recorded myself completing those puzzles for the first time. This is World C1, and the video you're seeing is my first exploration into trying to break C1, so I thought I would go through some of the thought processes behind it and how I try and find these breaks. This won't be the actual walkthrough as to how to break the series. I'll come up with some more concise walkthroughs for you for another video and add those to the normal playlist. So this is World C1 and the first time breaking it. The first puzzle I went into over there, I just couldn't really find any elements I thought would be exploitable, so I headed over to this puzzle and immediately saw that a box next to some sort of rubble on the floor. Now, a lot of these puzzles have reused assets, and I wanted to see how the box interacted with this rubble. Sometimes in previous worlds where you clip the box into particular assets, the box kind of flips out and starts doing weird stuff, and you can get it to rest at angles and things, making the box easier to grab from above. Unfortunately, the box was just going straight into the rubble as if the rubble didn't have any collision rather than bouncing off it. So now I started looking for raised ground to see if I could put the box down and jump to any walls from it. A lot of the time I'm looking for jump prompts, and also checking bits of architecture like this one here just to see if it has proper collision that you can stand on or whether it tries to push you off, because a lot of the broken architecture in Talos tries to push you off it when you jump onto it. Again, I found some more rubble that I just wanted to see if it would support the box or whether the box would sink into it, and again the box sank into it. So I had a feeling that having a single box here may not be able to get me on top of any walls. This here was an attempt to see if I could again get the box to clip into a wall in order to make the box kind of start to flip out, and again it didn't really work. So I opted to just start solving the puzzle normally. So I took the box over to this jammer. I couldn't really remember what elements existed in the puzzle, so I came through here and found a second box and knew that finding the second box I could almost certainly now break this puzzle. I had a look around to see whether I thought it would be better to take the second box back through to the start with me, or to bring the first box back through to this little courtyard here to jump onto a wall. I opted to take this first one back through with me. I also brought a jammer because bringing as many puzzle elements as you can is just always better than not. So I wanted to try and bring boxes and jammers with me if I possibly could. One thing to say here is that I do use noclip when finding these solutions, and that's not an exception here, because without it, it would take just a very, very long time. This video would be probably closer to half an hour than a quarter of an hour. So I took these boxes back to the raised ground that I found earlier to see if I could jump from the quite steep hill up here. I expected I would be able to, because that mound on the floor is actually quite high. And again, just in case, I brought the jammer with me. And now we're on top of the walls, so from here I was pretty confident you'd be able to get to the sigil. It was just a case of finding in which direction along the walls you'd need to go. So from here I saw some raised wall over there. I thought getting higher is always better because dropping down onto things is easier than getting up onto things. And I expected that if you jumped off a box, that might be able to give you enough elevation to make the jump over to the higher wall. I did fall off the wall here a couple of times, just trying to move around the jammer in the box, and as I say, I just used noclip to make this easier. But I knew that I could get onto that wall with a jammer and a box, and that's really all that was required. So I put the box down right on the edge of the wall. I picked up the jammer to, again, bring it with me, just in case it was required, and then made the jump over to the wall. Fortunately managed to make this first time. So now I was heading towards the back end of this puzzle where the sigil is, and I was quite high as well. Now this is nice, because here I managed to get on top of the actual castle wall. These kind of turreted walls, I'm not sure what you call these, but with the raised parts and the lower parts that follow each other, I wanted to kind of know how they work, how they act, whether you had enough space to, for example, stand in the gaps between the raised parts of these walls, and if you could stand on top of them, because they're quite frequently found in the level. So having explored the walls on top of this puzzle, I worked out that it was fairly easy from that point to get to the sigil. I stayed around the puzzle for a while longer though, because I just wanted to see if there was an easier way of getting to it. Because I went all around the edge of the puzzle to get to it, and I thought since I have a jammer with me, I might be able to just drop down halfway through the puzzle and jam the fizzler in front of the sigil and do it a little bit easier. I also wanted to check in this direction as well, because I couldn't quite remember what happened around here. I had a jammer with me and I managed to jam the fan straight away, which I thought might be a step in the right direction. I thought through here may even be the sigil, but unfortunately I couldn't quite get to the end there. So I headed back previously. I also tried to see if I could jam the fizzler through the purple fizzler with the jammer, but it just wasn't quite a good enough angle. So I headed back in the same direction, expecting there to be a better way of getting to the sigil, and there is. So, starting in the same direction again, jumping onto the higher walls, I was trying to see if I could jam the fizzler in front of the sigil from over the portcullis over there, but I couldn't, so I carried on heading in the same direction. And this time I went in a different direction, but there I could see that I'd be able to jam the fizzler with the sigil behind it. So I headed in that direction instead this time. Again, just using no clip to speed things along. And now we were quite easily into the final chamber with the sigil there, which just kind of knocks another 30 seconds or so off that solution when I come to make the episode for I Will Break Your Game. It just makes the solution slightly easier. So the next thing I wanted to try and do, because it's always helpful if you can, is to see if I could get the cube out of this puzzle, and the jammer if that was also possible. So I brought the jammer back with me. I knew I could have the jammer at this point in the solution. And decided to go in the other direction, and it looked like I might fairly easily be able to get on top of the walls here. So first of all I brought the jammer through to see if I could drop it out of the level. And it turned out doing so was fairly easy. You could just stand on the edge of the wall there and be able to drop it out. The box I wasn't quite as sure about just because it was larger, and if I had to drop it through the gap I wasn't sure if there'd be enough space. Again, I just wanted to test this architecture here to see if it was actually at the top somewhere that you were able to stand on, or whether it would just push you off. Again, for future reference, because you often find those assets reused. It turned out that you weren't able to stand on it, so now I know not to use that as a solution in the future. Again, I came back to this spot and was able to get out with the box. So now I knew I could get at least a box and a jammer out of this puzzle quite easily. When I first had a look at this puzzle in here, it looked really quite minimal. The walls were all fairly high, and it didn't look like there was going to be any way of getting on top of them. There were no boxes or anything like that. I also quickly wanted to scout out the start of this labyrinth level just to see what was going on here. But again, I knew there weren't going to be any boxes in this puzzle, so I left quite quickly. So now I wanted to see if from the outside of these two puzzles, a single box would be enough to get in. The ground is very uneven around here, which is always good, because it means you can put down stacks of 2 boxes, and there's usually somewhere you can put them down, go up to higher ground and jump on top of them from. You can see on my left here are quite a lot of hills you could quite easily jump to a 2-box stack from. So things like that are quite nice to find. But I thought it would be easier, if it was possible at all, to get into these puzzles with a single box, so I just wanted to see if that was possible. And I saw there's some raised ground in the corner over here, and was pleasantly surprised to find that you could actually very easily get on top of the wall there. I didn't expect that wall to push me off, but hopefully we can clear it to jump into the room with the sigil, and that was the case. So that was the second sigil solved, much more easily than I expected it to be. Next I wanted to find out whether I could also use this box to get back into the puzzle labyrinth. So I brought this back round to the front of the level, because I remembered seeing a kind of a pile of rocks that I thought if it had collision I might be able to stand on with the box and get on top of the walls from there. So here we are, brought the cube back round to these rocks and placed it on top to see just how high this would actually get me. This was also a nice way to test whether I could get jump prompts into the gaps in this kind of wall that would be around a lot in World C. And you can, which is really quite helpful to bear in mind for future. Again, I wanted to test this wall. It looked like it might push me off, and it does. But I know I'm not at the start of the level anymore, so I wanted to have a look around just to see what was going on here. because maybe jumping into this level halfway through means that it's somehow much more easily completable. Didn't really look like that was the case, so I headed back to the original starting wall to see if from here I could get to the sigil, but it wasn't looking particularly good. With this kind of wall trying to push me off, it didn't seem like there was going to be any particular route I could take jumping along this wall to get to the sigil. I saw a very small sticking out part of the wall to my left here, and I wanted to see if you could jump on top of that, but it just seemed too thin to be able to support the weight. So it was looking like this wasn't going to be possible. So I decided to go in a different direction. I took the cube from the rocks and headed back round in the same direction as before. I thought it may be possible to use the same break previously and just head in a different direction along the walls. I didn't really consider that when I was actually there. So I checked how high these walls were to see if there was any way of getting up. These all looked fairly inaccessible. And so, again, I decided to head back round to the original place that I put it to break the other puzzle. On the way, though, I wanted to test see if this wall's sort of not quite formed top was actually a platform that you could stand on, because you can see a small shelf there, but it didn't look like that was possible. So I jumped on top of this wall. I edged my way down just to see if it was possible to grab and bring the cube with you. Again, I didn't know if I'd need it, but it's nice for future reference. I thought that this was going to be just about possible, and indeed it was, so that's nice to know. And then I headed round to the end of this puzzle, but the sigil is kind of trapped from here. So first of all I headed down to see if I could access the sigil from this sort of outside of the map area. Also, I just wanted to see if this floor had collision at all, because it disappearing and reappearing, I felt like I might actually drop straight out of the map if I went down there. But that wasn't the case. But now was the issue of getting to the sigil while the turrets were seeing me. I went into no clip here just to see if the sigil was indeed where I thought it was, and I decided to kind of reverse engineer this one and realised the solution was pretty simple. So I went into the sigil chamber and worked backwards from there, and found that if I just turned around before, I would have quite easily found the solution to this break. And from here I could head into the sigil chamber, and now we only have one more puzzle to do in World C1. I was quite happy with the speed at which I'd broken the first 3 puzzles. Some of these levels take me a couple of hours to break, and even though I've cut out a little bit from the start of this level where I just nipped in and had a look around at some of the levels to see what elements were where, this didn't take me more than half an hour to break them all. So finally I headed round to the back level, forgetting I just couldn't take the cube through the purple fizzler. You would have thought I'd remember that by now. The first thing I wanted to do is there were these rocks that all piled up against the walls, and I didn't know how high the walls were going to be all the way around, but I thought if it's accessible by climbing the rocks and getting over the wall, then that'd be a good way to enter the level. So I went around the edge, but these walls were all incredibly high, and I knew that was basically a non-starter when I got around to the back here and saw that the walls were this high all the way around. So I headed back round to the front of the level. I knew that unless there was some way of interacting with the level through the purple fizzler by perhaps jamming a fizzler from the outside with a jammer, that I was going to have to deal with this puzzle entirely on its own terms, and it looked like there was no way to interact with the puzzle through the jammer. There's nothing to jam here. There's nothing, maybe no receivers for lasers or anything like that. So this puzzle was entirely a self-contained break. I knew that was going to be the case. I came in and very quickly saw that there were 3 cubes in the puzzle, and I knew that that had to be my goal. I needed to get all 3 cubes into the middle of the level, and that would be almost certainly a break. 3 cubes is the magic number, as you'll be aware if you've seen World B in the I Will Break Your Game series. So again, I brought the splitter through with me just because having more elements is better than not, and I started working towards getting all 3 cubes into the centre of the level with me. I also wanted to see whether getting all 3 cubes was going to be a viable way of doing this. I needed to make sure there was a way of getting into the sigil chamber by getting on top of the walls, and I saw that this jump up here may look like a way of doing so, so I wanted to make sure this was doable. From here it looked like it might not be, but I thought I would be able to bring a cube with me if I had 3 cubes. So if jumping from a cube onto that roof was a viable jump, then I was pretty sure I had this puzzle broken, and it was. Fortunately this roof has collision, I didn't just fall through it, and the jump was possible. So I knew that the end goal was to get a staircase of 3 cubes up onto this wall and then jump over to the roof, and that was the puzzle complete. So now I just needed to get the 3rd cube, which kind of took me longer than it should have really. I didn't realise just how simple it was. All you need to do is grab the splitter and open the fizzler. I thought the angle was actually too difficult to do. I thought I was missing a second splitter somewhere on the level, but that's not the case. So, not finding another splitter, I decided to simply grab the one splitter we did have and see if I could get the third cube with that alone, and you can. So once this fizzler was open, we had 3 cubes, and I knew that was pretty much the end of it. Once we have 3 cubes, we can make the staircase up onto the wall. We can come back and grab one of the cubes and use it to make the jump over to the roof fairly easily. So this level C1 was all but complete. Thank you for watching this episode of the Breaking of the Talos Principle. What I'm planning on doing is releasing one of these episodes alongside each of the episodes in I Will Break Your Game, featuring the Talos Principle. So there'll probably be 7 of these episodes, one for each of the levels in World C. Although the I Will Break Your Game will continue just as a more concise way of showing you the solutions to these if you're using them. I just thought this would be an interesting way of showing you kind of what I'm looking for when I break these puzzles. So let me know what you thought of the series, if you thought it was interesting. If you did think it was interesting, then I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.